All right, thank you, everyone. My talk today is Save Your Game, Save the World. Now, as Charlotte said earlier today, she believes that games can save the world, and she's totally right. And I'm going to talk to you today about how they already are. But before I get started, first thing we need to talk about is what gamers are, what gaming is. Now, first of all, everyone here knows games are for kids, right? People like this, teenage boys, that's who plays games. We all know that, right? Wrong. Gamers are actually more like this, or this, and yes, even this. The gamer demographic is everybody. The average age of a gamer is 37 years old. 29% of all gamers are over the age of 50, and 42% are women. Gaming itself is huge. Last year alone in the U.S., a $25 billion market, bigger than movies and music combined, and growing. 72% of American households play video games right now, and that's growing rapidly. In the next 20 years, games will be the form of entertainment that defines our culture. So maybe you're asking me now, okay, great, Michael, that's nice. Yeah, you can call me Michael, that's fine. How is it going to change the world? How is it going to save the world? Well, as John was talking about earlier, one example comes from science and medicine. The MPMV protein is one of the enzymes that lets the HIV virus multiply and turn into AIDS. For 10 years, scientists have been trying to build a model of this enzyme so then they could design drugs that could shut it off. 10 years. Gamers solved it in 10 days. They used a program called Foldit, designed at the University of Washington by their computer science department, where the gamers can get in and they can fold proteins and they can mess around with them, play around with them, build their own models, and then see if those models are viable in nature. And this example is just the tip of the iceberg. Using Foldit, they're targeting cancer, Alzheimer's. There's no end. So then you're thinking, okay, that's great, so that's one little success. Well, what about communication? What about bringing people together? Just a show of hands, does anyone here use the internet? Cool. Anyone like the internet? Well, you're welcome. You can thank games for that. The C programming language was developed in 1969 by Dennis Ritchie. One of the first things he did with the C programming language was create the Unix operating system. Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie and some others worked together at Bell Labs to invent this operating system. In 1979, DARPA, the inventors of the internet, consolidated all their servers to use one operating system, and they chose Unix. And to this day, the majority of servers on the internet use Unix or a variation of it, Linux. Now the question is, well, why did they make this awesome operating system that unleashed the power of the internet? To play a game, of course. Ken Thompson had written a game called Space Travel. Now the problem was you had to play it on a mainframe, and in the 60s, mainframe time was $75 an hour. Now, gamers are pretty hardcore, but that's not affordable entertainment. So they sat down and thought, how can we figure something out? How can we write an awesome multi-user operating system where we can play this game? And that's how they developed Unix. Well, how else can games bring people together, since we're on this subject? Well, game communities, the power of these communities is amazing. One of the biggest problems we're facing in the world is the Arab-Israeli conflict. It seems like it has no solution. Both sides hate each other. They're taught to hate each other from birth. There's no way to make them see each other, see eye to eye, is there? Yes, there is. In game communities, they're forced to treat each other with respect because they don't want to get banned. So you'll have game forums where they talk about politics, they talk about international relations, even with people on the other side. What's really interesting then is when someone finds out that the person in their guild that they've been doing things together with for years is from one of these other countries that they're supposed to hate. Now, years of political indoctrination can change a lot of people's ideas and make people hate other people, but when it's raid night and you're down a healer, that goes out the window. There is fat loot to be had. What else from game communities do we get? Well, 20% of new couples now meet online. And for alternative lifestyles who have trouble meeting people like themselves, that number is over 60%. One of the reasons this works so well in games is because games are great at building trust. You agree to a certain set of rules, you agree to play until the game ends, and in some virtual games, you actually put your virtual life in someone else's hands. Doing these things together build an enormous amount of trust, and trust is the foundation of any good relationship. In some of these gaming communities, the people get together and send care packages to military abroad. The military members abroad can stay connected with their friends back home through these games. And in some situations, especially when deployed in remote areas or on submarines, playing games is the only thing that keeps morale and sanity maintained. Now, a little more serious subject is the way that gaming communities can save people from terrible situations. In one of our games, we had a player, her name is Jody, and she was the victim of pretty severe spousal abuse. She couldn't leave the house, she couldn't call her family. The physical abuse was a component as well, but she had no recourse. She didn't think there was any way for her to get out. But through playing one of our games, she met people on the game. Fortunately, her husband didn't know you could talk to people through these games. And they told her, Jody, you've got to get out. You've got kids. You have to get out of that situation. And eventually, she did. She took her 4 kids and the clothes on their backs, and she got out. The difference was, before she had nowhere to go. But now she went to the houses of other people in the game. And people in the game donated clothing, donated books, donated toys, anything they could to help her get started. And the next year, she came to one of our annual conventions and got to meet the rest of the people that had donated things and helped really save her and her children's lives. Another really awesome thing about games is the way they can train and rewire your brain. There's something neuroscientists study called the Tetris effect. Now, anyone here who's ever played Tetris has experienced one version of this, which is you stop playing and you still see the little Tetronimos all over the wall or in the air, and you're like, oh my God, I'm going insane. But there's other benefits to that. Sufferers of amnesia can use Tetris to retrain their brain how to write short-term memory. It's also been shown that by playing Tetris, that confuses or fills the time of the way your brain writes short-term memory, and it can replace memories of trauma, which helps victims of traumatic situations or even sufferers of PTSD. America's Army is a first-person shooter that was invented by the U.S. government, primarily for PR and recruitment, but it went so well, now they use it as a platform for training simulations as well. A couple of years ago in North Carolina, a player of America's Army saw an SUV roll and flip over on the highway. He ran over to the SUV, he pulled someone out of the smoking wreck, and there was another person inside, pulled him out, and he saw that he was bleeding heavily as multiple fingers had been severed from his hand. Using the training he received in Level 2 medic class training of America's Army, he stopped the bleeding and saved that person's life. Burn Center is another really interesting game that was funded by the federal government. It simulates what would happen if there was a massive explosion at an amusement park and there were 2,000 burn victims. Now that number is significant because in the whole United States, we only have 1,800 burn beds. So a situation like that would require more care than we can handle in our whole country. Now what the game does is it helps healthcare professionals deal with the chaos, learn the triage, experiment with what's going to work. They can follow the lives of the patients and see where they make mistakes. So if that situation ever happens again, they'll be prepared. Now there's a lot of criticisms of technology and how it pulls people apart. I think a lot of us have seen people at a restaurant, 4 people there, they're all texting away, and you're like, man, what's the point? But games bring people together. 45% of parents play computer and video games with their children at least weekly. And what's the main reason? 85% of the time, because their children ask them to. How many parents would love to do something with their kids because it's their kids that want them to do it? These games also bridge cultural and age gaps. A perfect example from my own family, just a few weeks ago, my wife, myself, our 2 daughters were playing a game together, a cooperative game. And when the game ended, I'd had a particularly good game that time. My daughter said, Daddy, you are, with genuine awe, I'm not making this up, Daddy, you are awesome. I want your autograph. And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. Now, before I got too excited, I reminded myself she's not a teenager yet, so I'm not out of the woods yet, but but still really cool. Plants vs. Zombies is a game that my wife played first, then I played, our 9-year-old played, our 5-year-old played, and then 64-year-old Asian grandmother played. And then 65-year-old Asian grandfather, who'd never played a game in his life, saw how much fun everyone else was playing and said, hey, I want to participate somehow. But he doesn't know how to play games. So what he does is he logs on to every other person's account religiously and waters the plants in their Zen garden. He can't play the real game, but that's how he can contribute. And so through that game, 3 generations of people are able to share an experience that's really awesome and brings us closer together. So back to what I said at the beginning, save your game, save the world. Hopefully that bold statement is a little bit less absurd now than it was 9 minutes ago. I can certainly say that games have saved my world. I started my gaming company while I was in law school. Hated being a lawyer, which is why I don't do it. And in our first game, I met my wife, who was at a different law school, so saved her life too. By both of us working together in this company and having our own company making games, we've had flexibility to be able to experience our children's lives in a way that would not have been possible in other career paths. Now, if you take nothing else away from this talk today, what I hope you'll take away is the fact that games are an amazing, positive, playfully innovative form of entertainment that brings tremendous value to the world. And I have a call to action for everybody here. To gamers, be proud of your hobby and share your gaming experiences with everyone who will listen. And to non-gamers, try some games. Give them a shot. See what you're missing. You may not save the world, but you'll have fun trying. Thanks a lot.